Hi everyone. I'm still kind of gathering myself after that, and it's not the first time I've seen the film, so I imagine that some of you are as well. Congratulations to all of you guys. I mean, Alyssa especially, but Jesse and Russell too. It's a powerful testament to all of your creativity and the journey that you've been through and still on. I'm an art guy, I'm an art writer and critic, and so my main interest here is to talk to these guys about their art and what that means to them. But I have plenty of questions for Alyssa too. I want to start out by asking you both when you first imagined yourselves as artists, when you first saw that as a life's path rather than just a thing you did in your spare time. Jesse, perhaps you can go first.
Yeah, and thank you. And thank you all for coming out and watching the film. It's an honor to be here. I think when it really solidified for me was when I was incarcerated. Because I had always been an artist, like some kind of maker. I had always kind of created my entire life. But it never really hit me that could be a real pathway to be something that is sustainable as like a practice or a career, even after graduating from college. So, that's when it started to kind of formulate in my mind that this is something that is actually a core part of my identity. But it wasn't until I actually went into prison and realized that, they could basically take me away from my family, take me away from the community, ship me as far away as they could possibly send me, and strip me of basically all societal markers. But the one thing they couldn't take from me was my ability to create. And that was the moment where my identity shifted from, being a criminal or someone who is not worthy, to being an artist. And so it allowed me to kind of embody that identity in a very significant way, where I knew that I was just going to be an artist no matter what.
For me, it's a little complicated. If we wanted to keep it simple, I would say a similar thing like Jesse saying it in prison is when I decided to really that this was going to be what I do. And not no doubt of anything else, not try to get a job or whatever. I was really solid on that I wanted to be an artist and nothing else. It was no plan B. It was be an artist or die. But it kind of started before that. One time I was on a corner in North Philly, I'm from Philadelphia, and I told one of my friends that I had a number 2 pencils, what made me had a thought, and I was like, I need to be an artist or I'm gonna wind up dead, But it was and he was like, well, you better pick that pencil up, So, but it didn't go further than that conversation. Once I went to prison is when I started practicing and really started visualizing where we are today, and then to meet Jesse and to be on the same, we met and just got along. It's like God or whatever that brought us together.
I mean, one of the moments I really enjoyed in the film was when you say that artists are actually really revered in prison, which, they kind of are and kind of are not in wider society, right? We typically look up to artists, but we don't treat them that well. It's not an easy job, we don't make it easy for them.
It's the 1% of 1% of 1% that actually get the kind of attention and acclaim, but the rest of the artists in society are just very unsupported.
Yeah, but I like that. And then also the distinction you make between the kind of work that is prized amongst inmates, there's portraiture especially, and what was that phrase, that it's like a card trick or something, and the real work is somewhere else. And anyone who's good at drawing and wants to pursue art encounters that problem, right? The stuff that's easy and the stuff that's really hard or harder to grasp. I'm going to turn to Alyssa. You don't say in the film how you encountered Jesse, how you heard his name, where you heard his name first of all, and how you reached out to him, how you made contact, and how you won his trust to start filming him.
So I heard about Jesse at the end of 2013, early 2014, and you'd just come home. And I follow this. I'm also an artist, but I have been interested in sort of ending mass incarceration and human rights issues. And I followed this pretty small but really powerful blog called Prison Photography by this guy Pete Brook, where he writes about and posts images of work by and about people who've been incarcerated. And there was kind of a small post, and it had like 1 or 2 pictures of Apocalyptine, the mural that Jesse made, and just really straightforward description of like, here's this person, he's just come home, he made this 40-foot mural, and this is what it's made out of. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, this is super compelling, the way that the work is using the materials of the prison kind of against itself as commentary, but also as an act of creativity and survival. And it spoke to me about like why we make art and what it can do, and why it's sort of dangerous in a way, in the best way, for systems and structures. And it was beautiful also. I was like compelled by it, like, what is this? What is this thing? And so Jesse had already put up a website. We were actually just talking about how like we both have names that are maybe like slightly less common, and so he had jessekrimes.com, and wasn't hard to find. And I reached out, I sent him an email, and I was like, I just want to say that your work is striking to me, and this is who I am. I'm a filmmaker, and I shared some of my work. And we started talking, like he was in Philly, I was in LA, but we had some phone calls, and he watched my work, and we just kept talking. It was like, well, what would it mean to tell his story, and to kind of situate it in a bigger story? And you know, I'll let him say why, if and why you trusted me, but I feel like a few months afterwards, I just flew out to meet you in person, and we had a first kind of on-camera interview that actually, I was expecting it to be more like a development interview that wouldn't be in the film, but it ended up being there. And I thought that the film would be a short, like just mostly focused on the past tense about how Apocalyptine was made, et cetera. But then when Jesse introduced me to Russell, who
she told me it would be a year.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, and it ended up being 8 or 7.
Exactly. But yeah, do you remember anything else that I'm leaving out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that, because honestly, I was a bit reluctant in the beginning. Like I am largely, like most artists, I think we're mostly introverts. But at the time when Alyssa reached out to me and I had just come home from prison, I mean, I was still in the halfway house. It was a time when like people were not saying mass incarceration, like it was not in the public lexicon in the same way that it is today. And you know, she had shared her work with me, and I thought like her past work, Unfinished Spaces, was like a very beautiful, moving film. But also she was like very open to like doing this process in a more kind of collaborative way, which felt very honest and kind of important to me. And so, yeah, I agreed to do it because I thought that if my story could in any way kind of highlight this issue to a broader audience, that I felt a very personal responsibility to use my artwork and story as a way to kind of showcase all of these other incredible artists that I've met while I was incarcerated and since coming home, who were just not getting any real attention. And also just the larger issue in general. And so I felt very comfortable working with her, even though I was reluctant. And I'm glad that I did, because I think this film is, you know, not just a showcase about the work, but it is something much broader than that. And it is also like, it serves as a function of advocacy and a tool that can engage audiences in ways that artwork often won't, because of who is like self-selecting, who is going to come to a museum versus who will watch a film on Paramount Plus, which is a much broader audience. And so in many ways, yeah, I'm really appreciative and glad to have worked with her and been along for the process for 7 or 8 years.
Was it imagined as a collaborative process from the start?
To some extent. I mean, Jesse was really, you guys were all very busy with your own art and careers. So there was like mutual respect in that, where it's like, we're all artists trying to make it, and this is one project of several projects, and also trying to pay the bills, because this one was not doing that for any of us. And so it was collaborative to the extent, but also not wanting to not demand too much of their time, right? And also, like, I think with the animation is a good example, where it's like kind of at every step I tried to go to Jesse first, or Russell, or whoever is involved, and be like, do you want to be involved with this? Do you want to make the animation yourself or not? And with the animation, for example, you said, no, I don't want it. Like, I want to be involved with the concept and like review it and such, but not create it. You didn't want to like learn After Effects for kicks.
I didn't have the time or capacity to learn how to animate.
Yeah.
But I did think like the
But we collaborated on it.
Yeah, but the actual kind of conceptual underpinnings of what that collaboration or what that animation looked like, because again, she was trying to capture like my emotional state, or even what it feels like to be incarcerated, because you're trying to depict scenes that, you know, no one really has access to. And so working with Molly Schwartz, who animated all of those sections, it was very easy for me, because I gave her the reference of William Kentridge, actually. Because William Kentridge is someone who depicts time in a way through creation, but also erasure. And for me, that captures like the cyclical way that like time shifts in prison. So out here, everyone experiences time mostly in like a linear fashion, where it's like, you know, day to day, week to week, month to month. But in there, because it's like Groundhog Day, you're literally in the same environment, nothing changes, nothing ever gets really altered. It feels like you're living the same day over and over, and time is simultaneously going forward, but also not moving at all. And so like Kentridge's work, I think, captures that grittiness and that kind of that simultaneousness of like time moving but standing still. And so like that was one of the ways that we kind of collaborated on some of the animation.
We're also really, along the way, encouraging of us working with other formerly incarcerated artists. So another example of that is like in the music. The score is by Amanda Jones, who's an amazing film composer, but she collaborated with formerly incarcerated and actually one currently incarcerated musician. So their voices are like embedded in the score. We did a recording session. Originally, we were going to go into a prison and record there, but with COVID, we had to do it remotely with folks who'd already come home. And so that was one way where we were thinking about like, okay, how can we have a kind of almost like the fabric of the film, like Apocalypse Teen be, you know, like the sheets are touched by, you know, all of the bodies of the incarcerated people who make them, and also who sleep in those sheets. And so the score, it's like, it's unconscious. It's not something where we wanted it to be like obvious, but where in our collaborative process, we were thinking about and engaging with crew.
Who came up with the title?
Dylan Evans.
He sure did.
Our executive producer at MTV Documentary Films. It actually, when we first released it, it was called Krimes. We just had Krimes. And then when we partnered with MTV Docs, Sheila Nevins, who's our executive producer there, was like, I think we should like expand it more and make sure art's in the title and think about this concept of like, and I liked it, of, you know, Jesse's self-invention and this notion of like, he's creating art, but he's also creating himself.
Yeah. I mean, my assumption was that there was a pseudonym when I first heard about it. And when you see the sign outside the shop, it's like, no way, his name actually is Krimes. It's a nice
when I
moment.
I remember I first interviewed O, and I was like, so what was Jesse's nickname inside? He's like, Krimes.
Yeah,
You don't need a nickname.
I was like, everybody else got the coolest nicknames in prison, and I literally just got stuck with my own name. It was actual bullshit.
It's a strong brand. Would you have wanted to tell your story if you didn't have, you know, we in art and in film, all avenues of culture, we talk about storytelling, I think now more than we ever have, and telling one's own story. Is that something that had ever occurred to you? It doesn't seem to be something that you were doing in your art, but was that a sort of motivation for you?
I think most of my focus as an artist is on kind of larger systems and structures. And for me, prison is just a microcosm of society. And so, you can think of prison as like a singular thing, but in my mind, we incarcerate people from all over the world in our carceral system. And every single issue that is happening out here in society gets basically refracted and kind of refined within the prison system. And kind of all of the technologies of like power and control that are used to basically devalue people, devalue communities are really kind of perfected within the prison system. And so my focus has always been on those larger systems, which is what most of my work is about. But at the same time, again, it's like there are real human beings behind this system, right? And like, how do we think about ways that, how do we actually like push back against the disposable narrative that is pushed within the media around incarceration and within all sorts of other kind of like films that have come before where prisons are hyper violent, everyone is dangerous. And so there were a ton of narratives that were already existing, and one of my biggest motivating factors for doing this and trying to tell this story, or being open to telling this story, is that I think we need to put actual faces and show the full humanity of people who this system actually impacts. And so like that's why, for me, it was so very important that we did this film. And so like, artists like Craig gets to showcase everything that he's been doing, and Jared and Kano. And it's like, since coming home and starting the Right of Return Fellowship, I mean, we have 25 fellows now who are all doing like amazing, incredible work all over the country. And like, they are putting faces to names, and they are actually they're pushing back against like, no, this is not just a bigger system, this is actually like, I am an individual, and it provides that kind of story and narrative that I think connects with audiences in a more powerful way.
Well, maybe you could both tell us a bit about how Right of Return's operating at the moment, and how, you're not only giving opportunities to these artists, but you are sort of foregrounding or shining a light on those creators themselves. I know there's this the more recent like development with the art school foundation. Tell me about like how it's changed over the last couple of years since the film came out. Yeah, Russell, go ahead.
Well, basically, I remember when Jesse first brought it to my attention, was like we should, start like funding, formerly incarcerated artists like ourselves and things like that. So I was like definitely like with it, and I didn't like know like the components of like what it would look like and things like that. So over time, we going into like 4 years, and it's like it has developed and things like that. So it's just, and Jesse's like really the one to really thank for how he does his research on like the artists. Like we just don't select, and then we have a team of people who select the artists and things like that. And it's like different disciplines and things of that nature. So it just like grew over time as far as like, because like we do basically like visual arts, but we have different disciplines and things like that we consider and things like that. So it just was like awesome to see other artists like because I wasn't aware of like the talent of like the level, because like the prison that I was in, it was all pretty similar of like painting and things like that. So it was just awesome to just see the different varieties of like artists and potential and things like that. And then like the school, incorporating the school, and once we moving into that like elevation of like further helping artists further any like skills that they might lack in, things like that. So having funding and having an opportunity to have artists expand their practice is another blessing in itself.
So tell me how that will operate. Art and Advocacy Society was the name that I was searching for earlier.
Yeah, and so basically it's right of return has been the thing that we've been doing for the past 4 years. We just announced our 5th cohort, so the application is open right now. But we basically fund 6 formerly incarcerated artists across the country, give them $20,000 grants, and partner them with mentors and advocates and people who are working to end mass incarceration. And so we've been doing that this will be our 5th year, but we recently received significant funding from the Mellon Foundation and Art for Justice Fund, and we just hosted a charity auction with Christie's and raised another significant amount of money. And so we are very rapidly growing from an organization and staff of 2 to like probably 8 full-time staff. And basically what we're building out is what we're calling the Academy. And so that is something that we are building a curriculum that can be adopted by museums and institutions around the country to work with directly impacted people in their own communities. And I think that's a really powerful way to kind of scale the work that we're doing, because it will allow us to go from servicing around 6 artists every year through the fellowship to close to 3,000 to 4,000, depending how many institutions we get to take on our program and curriculum. And that curriculum is designed for emerging directly impacted artists. So it's really a pathway into the art world, into the advocacy space. And so that pathway will provide practice sustainability, how to be an artist, write artist statements, partner them with mentors like Rashid Johnson or Titus Kafar, and like really form the kind of basis and lay the groundwork for those artists to really thrive. And also create pathways into the right of return fellowship, which then after they go through the academy, they can apply to the fellowship. And the third facet of that is we're building a residency program in upstate Pennsylvania, which is going to be for every single discipline. So, formerly incarcerated or actually directly impacted. So we're opening it up. It's not just people who have been incarcerated, but people who have had a loved one who's incarcerated and somehow been negatively impacted by that system. And the residency will be for all disciplines like filmmakers, printmaking, sculpture, photography, dance. But it will really be a space where artists can come and focus on their practice, make work. And we will also host an annual retreat where we bring leading advocates working on criminal justice reform together with the artists from around the country as a way to form like a unified strategic vision to end mass incarceration.
One of the things that I was drawn to in work, but is this like the way that you're always working on like within and on these systems and institutions. Like one thing that's not in the film that I think we all wish was in the film is that Jesse was a lead plaintiff on a class action suit against Chase Bank. JP Morgan Chase, because there were predatory, there was a no bid deal between the government, the federal prison system, and Chase that was giving debit cards to people who came home that had exorbitant fees on them. And there's this kind of conceptual, I think of it as a conceptual work of art where it's like, challenging that and putting your name and getting the community together to challenge that, and they essentially won because it settled and it was precedential. But that and like the work you're doing now with the art and advocacy and working in institutions and kind of embedding feels like it's something that is of a piece with the sort of more physical work, let's say, even though I think it's all tied together. And that's part of why I knew like following this story would be interesting, because no matter where it ended up, it was always going to be, like statistically speaking, people are going to end up back in the system, right? And that was that could have been a likely outcome of the film when we started, but thank goodness it hasn't been. But like it's set up for that, right? But the work that you're doing will happen no matter where you are, on these institutions, and I find that super compelling. I hope that you see it in the film too, where it's like you can see this work you're doing now as part of a practice that's not limited by.
I mean, it's so much more than art, right? Like it is how do you actually leverage the creative practice, the the art world and the way that it exists, and how do you leverage that into the advocacy space? And I think there's just like a multitude of ways that all of these things connect, and it's just kind of figuring out how to operate and utilize what these systems are and kind of shift the kind of paradigm and perspective on how to, again, leverage that system to then further advocacy goals.
How do you also, you talk about transcending the category of a formerly incarcerated artist. Or maybe it was in something I read that I think your gallerist, is it Barry Marlin, said, you know, it's a hot category of artist now, since perhaps you came on the scene. And I get the sense, I think, I don't know if you say it explicitly in the film, that you kind of itch to just be an artist. How can you achieve that while also, you know, like with working in this field of advocacy? I know, you know, your art doesn't appear to be like overtly activist, but the context it's put in is often activist. How do you balance these things, both of you? I mean, like, you want to be taken seriously as an artist, but you also want to achieve these other aims.
I'll go first. That's an interesting question because that's something that I juggle with a lot. But kind of naturally, I'm already like an activist with my work. Is just automatic because of like all the experiences that I went through as like African American in this country and things. Before even the prison thing came into play, like oppression and stuff like that. So I think about that a lot and experienced a lot, and I incorporate it in almost all my work. And then basically, like when I start stepping out the realm of like doing like a lot of portraiture, even though I would do portraits of like victims of police brutality and things like that. Like if you notice in the film, I'm using like real blood that I got from the butcher to recreate the Rorschach ink block test for my psychiatric evaluations as an foster child. But I'm like touching on like the trauma of like witnessing police brutality, white supremacists in police uniform murder black people and stuff like that, and then paint the eyes of victims of those murders in the work. So it's like I start trying to get more conceptual with the work. So it's just like, and then it's like struggling, and then what you're saying is like that work is hard for people to live with. So as far as like trying to like sell the work and get collectors to put that work in their house, like the blood smells and stuff like that. So it's like it's a lot. It's a lot.
But also, maybe museums and institutions are very keen to embrace that kind of work, which tells stories, which they can in turn like attach stories to social justice mission. How about you, Jesse?
I mean, I think it is always like a catch-22, right? So like we want to be just artists, right? It's like even like most artists don't want to be a woman artist, right? Or a black artist. Everyone just wants to be an artist. But I also think it's like, at least in terms of like, again, I always try to think of these things strategically. And I think of timing, right? And like right now is a moment when a lot of people are paying attention to mass incarceration. It is I think it's one of the biggest human rights crises of our time. I mean, there are more black men under carceral control today than were enslaved in the 1850s, right? And so we just moved the plantations from the fields to behind the walls. And so I say that because it's like, now is a moment when I think people are grappling with racism in America in a very real way, even institutions and entire systems and structures. And so how do you kind of like separate yourself from other artists in the field? And also, how do you capitalize on this moment in a way that can provide real sustainability for what we're trying to build? And so I think of it in terms of timing, where it's like right now, like we say our fellowship is for formerly incarcerated artists. It works, right? It separates us from other organizations, from other funders, and it allows us to fundraise in a very powerful way. But at some point in time, we are strategically and very intentionally going to be making that shift and like work with PR firms and try to actually shift that language. And so that eventually we are just doing shows where it is not all formerly incarcerated artists, it is just artists. And so I think it's like, it's a subtle shift in timing and how that label drops off and it doesn't hold the same kind of significance, hopefully. Because that is like also how we win against mass incarceration, is that, you know, you're not formally incarcerated, you're not a convict, you're not an inmate. We're not using that kind of language anymore. Because language is a very powerful way of othering people, but also recognizing that it has the power to assist in building the opposition to the punitive systems that we're trying to push back against.
Final question for you all, really. I mean, I know the film premiered a year or so ago, but it's just now streaming and showing around the country. How do you have any examples of how the film, just being in the world, is moving the needle on these things? How you're getting a different response? I know a lot happens between the end of filming and now the PS1 show that Alex mentioned being sort of, but like, do you hope the film, will make a significant difference in terms of?
Yeah, I think it does, because there's a lot of misconceptions that people have of like people formerly incarcerated that have like no connection or experience with me and somebody that's coming out of the prison system and things like that. So it really added like a human element of like, you know, we like people, and then like especially like Jesse, he's very motivated, very good dude. I was getting a lot of like on my side of things, I would get like a lot of slack for finding a friend and like a white dude and things like that. And it's like, just because we experience like a lot of racism or whatever, which I experienced like a lot. And it showed that like, you know, all white dudes ain't bad. Like he tried his best to like help us when he had opportunities that we didn't have, like Pilot to Tokyo, like he was already like going places. And like whenever he the Soze organization, the Democratic National Convention, he had his show and he asked for me to be included, and he didn't have to do that. So it was like stuff like that that people never know about, or they'll think that we just like criminals forever or whatever. Like this movie shows you like the whole time we've been artists. When I made the decision that I was going to be an artist, and then we teamed up because that's what we had in common, and it went beyond race. It was like, yeah, we're going to be artists and we're going to use art as a tool to like better our lives. And then we start having other talks like we're going to not only better our lives, we're going to help better other people. That's what our similar situation. So the movie is like a testimony to that, like, and it's years in the making. So it's not like nothing that was made up. We wasn't put together by nobody on some fake stuff. It's the realest as it gets with us.
I mean, on like a anecdotal individual level, I've already seen people who have been like reaching out to me who have seen the film, who come from largely conservative areas. And it's like, they would usually never watch a film like this, right? Like they wouldn't even be interested. And so I've already had just like people in my life reach out to me and like, you know, just tell me they're proud of me and express like, oh, I had no idea this was happening. Like I had no idea these things were as bad as they are. And it's like, that's just coming from a very small subset of people that I interact with, tangentially. We all have friends who are like old Facebook friends who like, or maybe some of us don't, because I'm kind of old.
You don't avoid them,
I have
Jesse?
gray in my beard already, so. But it's like people on Facebook who I'm not really friends with anymore, but like went to school with, and people are reaching out. But it's like, I can tell it's shifting people's perspectives, but then on a bigger level, it's like, I don't know that we would have had the sale at Christie's. Like, I think it is, the film has validated the story that Craig is talking about, right? Like this is real. Like, we are real human beings. We are, that's my brother. Like, and all of the people that we're friends with in that film, like we actually genuinely, truly love each other. Like it's real, right? And we are good people. And I think that the film showcasing those things has validated the work that we do and the work of like the other fellows that we support in a way that has created space and access for institutions and museums and Christie's and, you know, all of these kind of structures that are in place. It has opened up the possibility and allowed them to work with us. Where it's like, if the film didn't come out, I don't know that that would have happened. And so I think it's really helping to shift the kind of cultural perspective from the top and the bottom, even in the very short time that it's been out.
Some work too, this is the panel where you're getting two artists who are in the film, but a lot of the screenings that we're doing are with other Right of Return fellows. And we have an artist bureau where we were able to, thanks to the generosity of one of our executive producers on the film, create some micro grants for folks who are Right of Return fellows so that they can participate in the outreach related to the film. So we've had screenings like in Houston, in Chicago. Jesse and I were just at a screening with Faylita Hicks, who's one of the Right of Return fellows who's based there. So really also bringing in people who are local to communities and giving them opportunities to also speak about their experience in relation to the film and how it's the same and how it's different. And that's been really interesting to me as a filmmaker. I hope we can continue that, and MTV has been supportive of that in terms of allowing the film to be screened in grassroots context. Like we're screening it in Philadelphia public schools all year. We did a screening here at Grand Arts High School in LA. So those are exciting to me, and we have one planned in February at San Quentin Prison, where we're hopefully all going to be able to go and screen it inside for the first time. Very rejected by another prison, but you know.
You were rejected?
Oh yeah, it was not fit for the general population. Which we're sort of proud
They didn't
of.
want people stealing all of their prison bed sheets, I think.
They were like, we need those sheets. And the hair gel. They needed the hair gel maybe.
LA looks as a hot commodity.
But anyway, those are things that are like interesting, where we can think of also the art world as a site for impact, where how can we bring in, you know, artists who, oftentimes when you reach out to a museum for a screening, and to Mocha's credit, they didn't say this, but oh, those artists are not in our collection, it's not related to a current exhibition, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, that's actually why we want to screen this film in your space, in this context, because we want you to think about, well, who is in your collection? Why are they in your collection? What are you showing upstairs in the museum, and why? And who's having a chance to hold the mic? So I'm excited about that, and we're going to continue our impact campaign. Hopefully then like dovetail and let the film continue to be of service with the organization that they co-founded, and it'll be on Paramount Plus for a long time.
It's incredibly inspiring. Congratulations to all of you. Does anyone here have any questions?
I'm just completely blown away. I don't know what to say. I'm like speechless. I would like to ask if you were able to talk to yourself 2 or 3 days before you were released, everything you know now, what would you tell yourselves right before you guys got out?
I had that talk with myself. So I was like, basically, I'm going to be an artist, and that's just that. So once I made my mind up like 100%, then like a whole lot of things, kind of like the universe, a lot of people like to use that term, like manifestation and things like that. I just like moved in that space and truly believe. It was like no doubt. Like, so, and it wasn't just the 2 days before. Like when you know that you're leaving, then you really had that talk with yourself, like I'm about to be back out in this world, you got to survive and stuff like that. And I was a foster kid, so I never had no family, like nobody waiting for me to take me to the halfway house and all that. I had the uniform from prison on that, so it was like another level because everybody had a family come pick them up and stuff like that. So that put emphasis on how important it was for me to be an artist because I already knew that I would be. And I was kind of thinking like being like a tattoo artist or whatever. So I did study, and I had taught myself how to read and write while I was inside. So I had planned all this, and then read books on art and things like that. So it was like really a game plan. So when I met Jesse, like I said, it was like God. It's not like some stuff that I'm saying because it sound cool, whatever. It's like really like an amazing story in the movie and catching all the parts. But like we had an understanding right away with all the racism that I experienced in prison and in my whole life or whatever. And like for me to automatically, like we had this like understanding of like we was going to like do all this stuff, and over the years all these things came together. It just, I don't know, it's like, and it's bigger than us. And then we started Right of Return because it's like we just the vessels, you know what I'm saying? And I don't always articulate it right, but we like on a mission from whatever God you believe in, because I'm not really like religious like that, but I've been chosen anyway, and we've been partnered up.
And I think I probably would have, well, I mean, it's hard. I don't know, honestly, because it's like, I think the only reason we are here right now is because of the amount of work that we put in. Because the first 5-6 years of being home, no one really paid any attention to us. Like, it was a struggle to get anything. We weren't really getting significant shows or any money. And so it's like, if I had known where things are now then, I probably would have told myself, oh, you don't have to work that hard. you don't have to kill yourself and work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I think like something would have been lost in that, because I feel like that is the fire that going through that system puts in you. And it is that fire that is inextinguishable. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I would have told myself anything, honestly.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's just one of the most moving art days of my life. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
That's, yeah, nobody can top that. Thank you for that question. And thank you guys. Huge round of applause to these guys. Thank you for coming out tonight.